MGM Beauty Salon, 1946. Sydney Guilleroff carefully sectioned Judy Garland's hair, preparing for yet another transformation the studio demanded. As Hollywood's most famous hairstylist, Sydney had worked with every major star, but his relationship with Judy was different. For over 20 years, from her teenage years through her final performances, Sydney was one of the few constants in her chaotic life. The salon chair became a confessional where Judy revealed truths she couldn't speak anywhere else. And Sydney, through his professional work, documented a story that most people never saw. Hair tells stories that makeup can hide and costumes can disguise. It reveals stress, malnutrition, chemical damage, and physical deterioration in ways that can't be concealed. Every time Sydney worked on Judy's hair, he was reading evidence written in keratin and follicles. What he discovered over 2 decades challenged everything the public believed about Hollywood glamour. This isn't about hairstyles or beauty secrets. This is about what Judy Garland's hair revealed about the systematic destruction of her body, and why Sydney kept those secrets until the very end. Sydney Guilleroff was Hollywood royalty in his own right. He created signature looks for stars, innovated techniques that defined eras, and became trusted confidant to the industry's most famous women. When he first met 13-year-old Frances Gumm in 1935, newly renamed Judy Garland, he saw a child with beautiful hair, but also saw something troubling in how studio executives discussed her appearance. They wanted to change everything about her. And Sydney was expected to be part of that transformation. In those early years, Judy's hair was healthy, thick, with natural shine that required minimal intervention to look beautiful on camera. Sydney would style it for various roles, creating looks that suited each character while maintaining the integrity of her hair. But he also noticed how the studio's demands began immediately affecting her. The constant processing, the harsh dyes, the tight pin curls that had to stay in place for hours under hot lights. Hair can only withstand so much stress before it begins to show damage. What Sydney observed over the late 1930s and early 1940s was gradual deterioration that alarmed him professionally. Judy's hair began losing its natural luster. It became more brittle, more prone to breakage. The texture changed in ways that indicated internal health problems rather than just external styling damage. Sydney recognized these signs because he had seen them before in performers who were being overworked and undernourished. But with Judy, the deterioration was accelerating faster than he had witnessed with anyone else. The salon chair conversations revealed what was causing the damage Sydney saw. Judy would talk about the pills the studio gave her, the strict diet requirements, the punishing schedule that left her exhausted. Sydney would work on her hair and notice the physical evidence confirming everything she described. Hair that should have been healthy for someone in their late teens and early 20s was showing stress patterns typical of someone decades older. This wasn't natural aging. This was damage from pharmaceutical abuse and systematic overwork. By the mid-1940s, Sydney had to dramatically adjust his techniques to accommodate Judy's deteriorating hair condition. He used gentler processes, more conditioning treatments, styling methods that minimized further damage. But he was fighting a losing battle because the root causes were beyond his control. No amount of professional hair care could compensate for what the studio system was doing to her body. Sydney found himself in the position of trying to maintain beautiful appearances while knowing that beneath the surface, serious damage was accumulating. What particularly troubled Sydney was witnessing the hair loss that began when Judy was still in her 20s. Not dramatic baldness, but significant thinning that required increasingly creative styling to disguise. Sydney became expert at creating volume where little natural hair remained, at positioning pieces to hide thinning areas, at constructing elaborate styles that masked deterioration. Each time he worked with her hair, he was essentially creating illusions that allowed exploitation to continue undetected. The salon chair also provided Sydney with insight into Judy's psychological state that others might miss. He noticed when she would unconsciously pull at her hair during stressful conversations, a nervous habit that caused additional breakage. He observed the way she studied herself in mirrors with evident dissatisfaction, the result of years of studio executives criticizing her appearance. He watched her relationship with her own image become poisoned by others' judgments, manifesting in behaviors that compounded the physical damage. Sydney also witnessed the weight fluctuations through changes in Judy's hair and scalp condition. Rapid weight loss affected hair growth cycles, causing increased shedding. Weight gain changed the way styles would sit and how treatments would process. Sydney learned to read Judy's current pharmaceutical regimen through what was happening with her hair, becoming an unwilling expert in the physical manifestations of addiction and abuse. One particular appointment in 1949 stood out in Sydney's memory as the moment he fully understood the scope of what was happening. Judy came to the salon for routine styling, but when Sydney began working, he was shocked by the extent of hair loss since her last visit just weeks earlier. Large sections had thinned dramatically. The hair that remained was damaged to the point of breaking with minimal handling. Sydney gently asked what was happening, and Judy broke down, explaining the toll that recent events had taken. He spent hours that day not styling her hair but simply sitting with her, offering what comfort he could while recognizing that the damage went far beyond what any hairstylist could repair. When MGM fired Judy in 1950, Sydney continued working with her independently whenever she had projects or performances. These appointments revealed the ongoing deterioration as her struggles continued without studio employment. The pharmaceutical dependencies that MGM had created didn't end with her termination. The psychological damage persisted. And the physical evidence continued accumulating in ways that Sydney documented through his professional observations. What Sydney understood was that hair serves as historical record of a person's health and stress over time. Each strand grows over months, encoding conditions during its development. By examining Judy's hair throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Sydney was essentially reading a timeline of ongoing trauma and damage. The evidence was literal and undeniable, written in the physical structure of keratin that his professional expertise allowed him to interpret. Sydney also witnessed how Judy's relationship with her appearance became increasingly distorted over the years. The young woman who once took pleasure in being made beautiful for roles gradually transformed into someone who saw only flaws when she looked in mirrors. The salon, which should have been a place of pampering and restoration, sometimes became another site of anxiety and self-criticism. Sydney tried to counteract this, offering reassurance and genuine compliments, but years of studio conditioning couldn't be overcome through kind words alone. The final years of Sydney's professional relationship with Judy were marked by his attempts to help her maintain dignity despite obvious physical decline. Her hair condition reflected her deteriorating overall health. Sydney did everything his considerable skill allowed to create beautiful styles, but he was working with damaged material that revealed the toll of decades of exploitation. Each appointment reminded him of the healthy, vibrant hair he had first worked with 30 years earlier and the systematic destruction that had occurred since. When Judy died in 1969, Sydney grieved the loss of someone he had known since she was a child, someone whose physical deterioration he had documented unwillingly through decades of professional observation. He attended her funeral and was struck by how the woman in the casket looked so different from the girl he had first met, aged far beyond her actual years by what had been done to her. For decades after Judy's death, Sydney maintained discretion about what he had observed during their professional relationship. He would speak generally about working with her, praising her talent and kindness, but keeping private the specific evidence of damage he had witnessed. Only near the end of his own life did Sydney begin sharing some of what he had seen, feeling that testimony about Hollywood's treatment of performers mattered more than maintaining comfortable illusions. What Sydney's account provides is biological evidence of systematic abuse. Hair doesn't lie. It records stress, malnutrition, chemical exposure, and overall health in ways that can be analyzed and understood. Sydney's professional expertise allowed him to read that record and understand what it meant. His testimony transforms vague awareness of Judy's struggles into concrete documentation of physical destruction occurring over decades. The glamorous hairstyles audiences admired were constructions built on top of damage, requiring increasing skill to create as the underlying condition deteriorated. Sydney's artistry kept Judy beautiful for cameras and audiences, but he knew the cost of maintaining that beauty, and it haunted him long after she was gone.